Things could be better for the Boston Bruins today. They're preparing to take on the reigning Stanley Cup champions with questions about Linus Ullmark's health, and they've been bumped from the top spot in the Locked On Power Rankings. Let's discuss it all on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself by purchasing a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASE medical.com. Speaking of medical issues, we do have a bit of a goaltending update as we await the prognosis for Linus Ullmark. First, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my dad jokes and hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren. All right, the update that we know at the moment is that Brandon Bussi has been called up from the Providence Bruins, according to AHL Transactions. And this was precipitated by Linus Ullmark suffering a lower body injury during the previous game in Arizona, right near the end, in overtime, in fact. And we still have not yet heard about the extent of the injury. The Bruins were off on Wednesday as they traveled from Arizona to Vegas, and Bussi officially recalled here on January 11th. Now, he was recalled back on the 7th of December, served in a backup role, did not see any NHL action, has yet to see any in his career, in fact. This season with Providence, he's 10-6-3 with a 2.94 goals against average and a .901 save percentage in 20 AHL appearances. And the Bruins will certainly be leaning on Jeremy Swayman here in the meantime. Not to say that Bussi won't see any action, but they don't have any back-to-backs scheduled until 2 weeks from now. A game on the 24th against Carolina, and then another in Ottawa on the 25th. So it's conceivable here that Swayman will get at least the next 2 starts. Maybe they go with Bussi on Monday afternoon against the New Jersey Devils, as it's a bit of a shorter rest there with an afternoon game after the Saturday night game in St. Louis. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see what the extent of Ullmark's injury is and whether or not he will be out long term. But with the recall, it's clear he's not able to go, at least for tonight, likely Saturday as well. He's probably being sent home, and the Bruins will roll with our boy Jeremy Swayman here for the foreseeable future. That's all we know at this point. There's also no updates on Matt Poitras. He was injured in the game against Arizona, an apparent shoulder injury. The Bruins brought 14 forwards with them on the trip, and so you can expect Oscar Steen or Jacob Lauko to draw back into the lineup in Poitras' absence, with John Beecher having come back in for the previous game. He looked pretty good in the faceoff circle and added a goal. So Bruins depth really going to be tested here. It's already being tested on the blue line with Brandon Carlo out, Derek Forbort out, Parker Witherspoon and Mason Lohrei have stepped up. Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm logging huge minutes. And this certainly could affect Boston's standing atop the Atlantic Division and the Eastern Conference. In fact, things are not going to get much easier for this team. Dom Lucian of The Athletic released a strength of schedule comparison between the first and second halves of the season. And here's what he says about Boston's schedule. No team faces a tougher cache of opponents than the Bruins in the second half, a complete reversal of their first half, in which no team had it easier. If you're wondering why the Bruins are off to such a strong start, that's part of the reason. I would add the goaltending tandem is another huge part of the reason. Boston's average opponent jumps from 87 projected points to 95. To make up for that, though, Boston will see more dates at home, going from 45% to 55%. So based on this chart, the Bruins had the easiest schedule, or tied for the easiest schedule in the NHL so far this season, with teams having projected 87 points to finish the season. But they did have a 45-55 home road split. So hopefully that will help offset things. But they're going to have 95 projected point opponents. And that's the toughest schedule in the NHL coming up here in the second half. So put the injuries along with that. And we could be in for a bit of a downstretch here for the Boston Bruins. Speaking of a downstretch, Locked On does our weekly power ranking votes among all 32 hosts. And this week, the Bruins were bumped from the top spot by the Florida Panthers. And we'll discuss how and why here as the podcast continues. Things are tough out there, and right now there is a pretty bad flu going around, and if you are in need of some help with that, Jace Medical is here for you. The Jace Pack is a case of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses like UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among other things. And according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. Just visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medication will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And while you're on YouTube, check out the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel called Locked On Sports Today. They're here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories like Bill Belichick being let go or parting ways with the Patriots here today. They're going to have full coverage of that. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Locked On NHL hosts. Every week we vote on the power rankings. And there was a bit of a surprise this week as the Bruins were ranked second in the Atlantic, with Florida coming out on top. Now, if you look at the standings, you see that Boston remains first in the Atlantic, record of 24-8-8, 56 points, a plus 27 goal differential, and a point percentage of 700. The Florida Panthers just slightly behind. They're 26-12-8, 54 points, a 675 point percentage, but a plus 28 goal differential, which is just slightly higher than our Boston Bruins. Here's where things get tricky. You could if you're doing power rankings, you could look at the season as a whole and say, this is the most powerful team in the Atlantic. Or you can refine your sample size a little bit and see who is looking strongest most recently. And there's no question right now, the Florida Panthers are looking very much like the team that went to the Stanley Cup final last season. They've won 8 in a row. They're 8-2 over their past 10. And if you look at the standings from Thanksgiving until today, the Bruins have certainly fallen off a little bit. In fact, in terms of point percentage, they rank 17th in the NHL over the past 22 games since November 24th. And that is third in the Atlantic behind the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. So there's a case to be made that they don't even belong in the top 2 at the moment. But still, that strong start has really given the Bruins some life and something to build on. If you look at their record from the start of the season until November 23rd, they were number 1, 14-1-3 to start the season, an .861 point percentage. And a lot of that was due to a pretty easy schedule to start the season. Some games against Chicago, Anaheim, San Jose. And if you look at, again, since Thanksgiving, they're kind of a middle of the pack team. Now, the fact that they have a bit of a cushion there is helpful in terms of the overall playoff race. I don't think they're really in danger at the moment of falling all the way back. The Tampa Bay Lightning are in the second wildcard spot, and they're 11 points back of the Bruins with 2 more games played. So it would take quite a regression for the Bruins to jump all the way out of the playoff picture. Of course, these injuries aren't going to help. Their underlying numbers aren't really helpful either. They're 22nd is shot attempt differential at 5-on-5. And in terms of expected goals, a bit better. They're at 21st with an expected goal rate of 48.82 at 5-on-5. So their special teams have been outstanding. Their 5-on-4 play, 4-on-5 play, their goaltending at 5-on-5 has been near league best. They're trailing the Winnipeg Jets. Goaltending in all situations is still tops in the NHL. Actually, no, they've dropped a bit. They're now second to the Winnipeg Jets. And that could only continue to fall if indeed Linus Ullmark is out for any length of time and Jeremy Swayman doesn't get, not that Jeremy Swayman is not up to the task. We all know that he is. He's one of the best young goalies in the NHL. He is a legitimate number 1 option in the NHL. But there's a difference between running tandem with Linus Ullmark and carrying the load on your own for an extended period of time. So that's kind of the story for the Bruins. Now, if we look at the rest of the Atlantic Division power rankings, we see that the Maple Leafs remain in third place, rightfully so. And again, you could make a case for them to be above to be above Boston based on recent play. They've won 4 in a row, 5-4-1 over their last 10, but Martin Jones has really stepped up for this team as of late. The Lightning I mentioned, they've played more games than anybody in the division, and they're stuck in the second wildcard spot. Detroit's only 1 point back of Tampa with 2 games in hand. Montreal is still kicking around with 40 points, but a minus 27 goal differential with a 500 point percentage. Buffalo and Ottawa very much lost causes. Ottawa especially with only 28 points and a 389 point percentage, which is incredibly disappointing for a team that had some playoff aspirations. They're 30th in the NHL at the moment. So yes, Florida probably does belong in the top spot at the moment. They haven't quite caught the Bruins, but they're right on the verge of doing so. They're red hot. Matthew Tkachuk has turned a corner and has started scoring again. And let's be honest, it's a very good team. They won the President's Trophy a couple years ago, went to the Stanley Cup final, and perhaps it's only a matter of time before Florida catches Boston, especially with these injuries, with a more difficult schedule coming up. And that hard schedule begins tonight against the reigning Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights, although they did play last night and were shut out. We'll preview that game here as the podcast continues here in a moment. There is no better place to play daily fantasy hockey than Sleeper. Sleeper is the number one choice for the Locked On Network for all your daily fantasy hockey needs. And you can win up to 8 times your bet right now on Sleeper. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Connor McDavid, David Pastrnak, Nathan McKinnon will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, plus minus, and more in a given game. You need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. But again, you can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can win big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. It's always a big deal when the Bruins take on the Blue Jackets because of the obvious storyline with Bruce Cassidy having been fired by the Bruins and then leading Vegas to a Stanley Cup championship in his first game behind the bench. Now, both teams, or I should say neither team, coming in hot here in this one. The Bruins are 5-3-2 over their last 10 games. They've lost 3 of their past 5, including 2 extra time losses recently to Colorado and Arizona. The Golden Knights are 3-7 over their last 10, and they played last night against Colorado and were shut out 3-0. So Vegas coming in here on a back-to-back situation, which hopefully will benefit the Bruins. Although they did travel yesterday, they're not necessarily fully rested per se, but they did have a day off. Whereas Colorado beat Vegas last night, and Colorado's reeling a little bit here with only a record of 3-7 over their last 10. I believe it was Aiden Hill who was in net for the Avalanche last night, so they'll probably get Logan Thompson here tonight. Thompson is 12-8-3 with a .902 save percentage. And let me just verify that it was indeed. Actually, it was Jiri Patera who played last night with someone I've never heard of backing him up. So Vegas's goalies are a bit banged up, dealing with illness. So who knows who will be in net for them. Obviously, for the Bruins, it will be Jeremy Swayman. Golden Knights are led in scoring by Jack Eichel, who has 42 points in 41 games. Mark Stone has yet to miss a game this season. He's got 39 in 41. On the blue line, Shea Theodore with 18 points in 20 games to lead them. And then there's a pretty big drop-off on the blue line after that. In terms of how they rank defensively and offensively, Vegas is 16th ranked with a 3.15 goals for ranking. The Bruins 11th at 3.35. Very similar defensive teams. Boston ranked 6th, allowing only 2.7 goals per game, with 2.78 being allowed by Vegas. Vegas's power play isn't especially great, 15th. Their penalty kill is 17th, while the Bruins are 5th and 3rd in those categories. The offense for Vegas has really slowed down. Eichel leads the team with 3 points over the past 5 games. And of course, that was highlighted by a shutout loss to Colorado just last night. So the Vegas Golden Knights will really be looking to get back on track here against Bruce Cassidy's former team. We'll see if there's any, we probably likely won't know, but in all probability, there's some money on the board here for this one, as Bruce Cassidy will be looking to give it to his former team and show them that they made, well, we'll debate that until the end of time, but it seems to have worked out so far for both teams, although Vegas, of course, has the massive advantage by having won the Stanley Cup. So Bruins, Vegas tonight. It's a 10 p.m. start, so make sure you get your coffee going and stay up for this one. I will offer a full recap on tomorrow's podcast, and if there are any Linus Ullmark or Matt Poitras updates, I'll post a quick short on YouTube, so please make sure to follow along over there as well to get those short updates. Thank you so much for taking some time to listen today, friends. I hope you're all doing well. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day.